Thanks, Rick. It's always nice to follow Rick. He does such a great job of kind of putting everything into concise terms and getting us all on the same page. So thanks for that. So today we're going to talk about UAS and public safety, and our panel today is Carl Blando from the Boston Police Department, Mike Ross from Skydio, and Moshe Cohen from Psychonia. And we're going to go through and we're going to talk about their specific experiences with drones today in streaming, in sensing, and the connectivity piece of it from their particular perspectives, but then also to look at the challenges they're facing with that. And then we're going to flip over to the positive side of how does this move forward in such a way that 5G helps with some of these operations, connectivity, and capability. So if we could go to the next slide. I got it here. Here we go. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. So first, I wanted to talk about how drones are being used in public safety. What we've seen over the past couple of years is that public safety has probably had the biggest impact on changing the perceptions of the general public as far as accepting drones to be used in public safety. That really changed during the hurricanes of Harvey, Irma, and Maria. The number of flights, thousands of flights in combination with manned or crewed aircraft were phenomenal, and there were no instances of any serious issues, but they brought great benefit. So I want to sweep around this really quick. What we found in our 2020 study with drone responders is that there were over 17 public safety use cases. And what was interesting about that is the 17 use cases could then be broken down to 3, 4, even 5 subcategories. So we were seeing over 50 use cases in how drones are really creating a paradigm shift in public safety operations. So when you look at this collage here, you can see at the upper left a structure fire where you can see the fires on one side and the fire has spread across the road to the backside of another house. Without the drone, that wouldn't be seen until much later. Next, you start seeing a thermal imaging of the actual structure fire and being able to see what that heat signature looks like and really give you an idea of structural integrity and those kind of things. The third one from the left at the top is the transportation capabilities of flying above an incident. You can imagine as you're approaching this from the horizontal, you can see a lot of fire and smoke, but you can't see what's involved. Now we start changing that. And then the next picture is finding a lost person, of being able to be out in the dark using thermal imaging and get actual coordinates and then be able to direct rescuers. And then it goes on to earthquakes, the protest overwatch. And I'll tell you a quick story in Richmond, Virginia. During one of the Confederate statue issues, we had a report of 3 men with long guns. Initially, we were flying with a helicopter, the Virginia State Police, but they couldn't get low enough to see. And so they switched over to the drone, and they were actually able to find the 3 people with long guns in about 3 minutes. And from that point, the view that was being used from that point forward was going to be the drone, and the helicopter wasn't used for that purpose anymore. So we've seen floods. We now see tethered operations where places like LA City Fire are putting tethered operations on their battalion chief vehicles so they can put it up immediately. We saw in Hawaii both watching the lava flow and the fissures and detecting sulfur dioxide. And we've seen flying over critical infrastructure as well as train derailments. You can see in the middle section there with the train cars, that was Lynchburg, Virginia, with crude oil fire into the river. And what you can see from that is a great deal, because often derailments occur in the rural areas, and being able to get up and see the lay of the land. Are there hazmat vehicles involved? Is it contaminating a waterway? And so on. And then down the bottom middle, you can see both the wildfire operations. And again, that goes into 6 different categories of how it's being used in wildfires. And then flying over like Marsh Harbor in Puerto Rico, where you're able to fly over a large area of damage from the hurricane. The uses are phenomenal. Now I want to switch over and talk specifically, and all those uses that I just mentioned are within visual line of sight operations. But now I want to flip to the beyond visual line of sight operations. And I think this is where it's really going to be a big difference and where 5G is going to play a significant role. As many of you may know, Chula Vista, California Police Department started the drone as a first responder concept under the Integration Pilot Project. And what's important about that is they have flown now over 11,000 missions. And as you can see to the right column here, some of the statistics it shows that it assisted in arrest in 1,208 times. It avoided dispatching a patrol unit. This means a patrol unit is not having to respond, and it makes the service available to the community 2,645 times. First on the scene, 5,786 times. Average response time, 103.89 seconds. So you start seeing that this is one of the number one priorities that we see in public safety, is having this drone as a first responder, applying and finding in advance, providing us with that intel to help us be more effective at what we do. So the state of public safety UAS programs in 2022, there are over 5,000 public safety UAS programs. UAS programs are more mature now, which means they're going into a lot more things. They're flying more missions and more types of missions, in a lot of cases more than they anticipated, and they're seeing the need to increase the number of remote pilots. Now, how do drones make a difference in public safety? Number one, they provide safety to the civilians and the responders, but providing us information that helps us deal with that most effectively. It improves our operational effectiveness because we have information that we cannot see from the ground. And I often ask people, would you ever make a decision with your eyes closed? And I see that's what it is without the drone. And it provides us with real-time situational awareness that in a lot of critical operations, that information literally saves life. And last, we've seen that drones have done a great deal of both seeing what the damage is from a disaster, but also monitoring disaster recovery. So now let me flip over to the promise of 5G. Wikipedia in one definition. Now this is not the perfect definition. It's just to give us a kind of a context of reference. Up to 100 times faster than 4G, 5G is creating never before seen opportunities for people and businesses with faster connectivity speeds, ultra low latency, and greater bandwidth, advancing societies, transforming industries, and dramatically enhancing day-to-day experiences. So we'll keep that in mind as we go forward. And now I want to bring in our panelists. So I'm going to first reach out to Carl, and I'd like you to introduce yourself first and tell a little bit about yourself and your program, and then go right into how you see this connectivity today, and then we'll wait and we'll do the second part of that in the next round. Carl.
Sure thing. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, everybody, for having me here today. My name's Carl Blando. I'm the UAS manager for the Boston Police Department. I've been with the Boston Police Department now. I'm a sergeant detective, but I'm into my 23rd year with the department. We first started using drones for crime scene response, where we just wanted to get an aerial photo, right? I mean, when you take photos at crime scenes, you want to get, whenever you can, you want to get that orthographic 90 degrees down shot of something. And we used to try to sometimes get a bucket truck from the fire department. You try to get on roofs of buildings or high porches. And, it was never the same. You're taking a shot on an angle, it distorts it a little bit. So, and it's also, right, you have to get people to assist you or wake people up at 3 a.m. to say, can we get on a building? With the drone, it just made it that much easier to just keep processing your scene. And from that infancy, right, I mean, we could use any drone to do it because we had an area cordoned off. We're taking manual photos. So I'm right under my drone, just out of its line of sight, and I'm taking the photos for my scene. So now you fast forward, the first dynamic use we used at crime scene was for crash scenes. We said, hey, how about if when we start figuring out which way the vehicle went and crashed, let's try to fly it low from the perspective of the person in the car, and let's try to fly it high to put it all into perspective for the people. And then we did the same for the crime scenes, right? So this might happen a day later, but if you have a shooting and people have to chase down video, and all you have is, hey, the car came in from here or the person ran in from here and then took off. Within a day or two, detectives could go find that suspect flight. So then what we would do is, we would get on Google Maps or something and start dissecting the area. And I'd look for what's the highest building that I can get on at the midpoint, because it just seemed like no matter what drones we were using in the city where it's congested, our houses, I don't know if you guys have something similar, they're called triple deckers, but it's a 3-family house, 3 rows. And in congested areas, it's a house, a driveway, a house, a driveway. So now you have my drone on like a 2.4 or 5.8 gigahertz system, and everybody's house has now multiple Wi-Fis, 3 at least 3 per house. And then you have on top of the roofs where we want to, if we can fly, then there's the cell phone arrays are up there too. And what we started figuring out was, um, if the manufacturer said, "Oh, we have a mile range or 2 mile range," that was if we went somewhere with nothing around. Um, but we were very limited. Sometimes I could barely fly one city street over, and you see the drone, and you're like, the drone's right there, but I'm starting to lose that video link, and we couldn't see what was going on. So now again, the next iteration, I leave crime scene response, and they put me in with our Homeland Security unit, and I'm still running the drones. And the thought was, more of the department is going to start using the drones. So whether it's the SWAT team, our hostage negotiators, we have to start ramping up for people to use this technology. And in a lot of those scenarios, you're not always going to be visual line of sight, right? If we have a barricaded subject, the last thing you want to do is be out in the open with a controller saying, "Hey, I'm the target." Do you know what I mean? So and again, even if with these drones, even if you have a drone with a 10-mile range, you go behind a big brick building and then try to fly on the other side of it, and there's issues. So I know when Charles mentioned this 5G summit, you get excited. In law enforcement, technology pushes everything over. So I don't want to take up everybody's time. We'll keep talking. I know we'll get back to it. But it's that, right? It's the future of the missions we want to do. If we want to get more towards drone as a first responder or quicker operations out there in the city, we need the range and that communication.
Thanks, Carl. So Moshe, I think you're over there in Israel, right?
Right. Yes.
Well, welcome to the webinar this morning. And what I'd like to do is just let you introduce yourself and then talk a little bit about, what you're doing in the space of drones and how the connectivity that you're seeing today is helping what you're doing.
Well, thank you for having me. It's afternoon here, but it's rather early. I'm CEO of Seconia, the co-founder of Seconia. I'm working on this project for a little bit over 10 years. Before that, I was flying helicopter for the Israeli Air Force. I logged more than 5,000 flight hours on board Cobras and Apaches. And later on, I switched to the industry. Seconia is specializing in decentralized mid-air collision systems. As was mentioned before, in order to integrate drones into the airspace, a DAA, detect and avoid system, is necessary. A layer that whenever two air vehicles are getting close to each other, to make sure that they will not collide. Now, this safety layer, needs to be shared by all participants, by all users of the low altitude airspace, meaning cars, drones, helicopters, and future air taxis. They will all have to have a shared collision avoidance system. No one should be excluded from the sky. Now, in order to have such a collision avoidance system that can allow efficient and intense use of the sky, a V2V, vehicle-to-vehicle network is absolutely necessary. I will not analyze here the whole situation because it will take too much time, but only a detect and avoid system that is based on a vehicle-to-vehicle system, a vehicle-to-vehicle network, can, in one hand, secure the safety, and on the other hand, can allow intense use of the sky, allow thousands of air vehicles to use the airspace at the same time, close to each other. And this, it is today maybe hard to envision a situation where so many air vehicles are sharing the sky, but it is not that far. First responders, for example, they have the fire, everybody must use the airspace above the fire. Firefighters on the ground, they need a drone to monitor their immediate or the close environment, and they are using airplanes to drop fire drones. AAM, air taxis, will land on the city roof, on the building roof, and delivery drone will be under them. So absolutely, it is only a detect and avoid system that is based on a vehicle-to-vehicle network can secure this future operation. And the 5G might provide this vehicle-to-vehicle network. It needs to be, of course, to be verified or to be developed. There is much work that needs to be done yet, but it might open the skies for intense use.
Thanks, Moshe. It's a very good, interesting part of the detect and avoid piece that we're talking about. So now, certainly, last but not least, is Mike Ross with Skydio. I think Skydio can now be recognized as America's largest drone manufacturer. Is that right?
It's
and
true.
Of course, a great supporter of drone responders. So we appreciate that because you make all resources free to public safety. But so, Mike, you all have had some great successes with Skydio today. So can you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Charles. So my name is Mike Ross. I look after product management here at Skydio. Prior to my time in product management, I actually flew the F-18 for the United States Navy as a fighter pilot, test pilot. So lots of time providing intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance support to ground units all over the world. I think our approach in this space has been one of building autonomy inherently into the vehicle itself, and largely around making sure that the vehicle can prevent collisions using onboard sense and perception. And so that's given us the ability to operate beyond visual line of sight safely in very complex environments, in close proximity and low altitude environments, so that you can really get down close to the target, understand what's going on without having to have eyes on the vehicle, which gives us just an incredible capability. I think from a 5G perspective, what we're excited about, and Detective Blando already raised this, is the ability to do that in RF challenged environments, right? The ISM bands that we typically have access to in the public safety space between 2.4 and 5 gigahertz are cluttered. And so the ability to have access to a low latency, high bandwidth, persistent data link that we can access really anywhere, whether that's in a dense urban environment with urban canyons and complex electromagnetic environments, or up and away in even more rural environments. The ability to have that persistent, low latency, high bandwidth data link is really going to be a game changer, I think, in the public safety space.
So, Carl, let's switch over a little bit and think about as you're looking forward into the 5G areas. What would you like to see? How would you like it to perform? What are your thoughts?
So, for our urban environment, it's that command and control, that's C2 that it was Rick mentioned earlier. We don't, because things happen, I don't know when the bell's going to get rung that we're going to have to head out. So it's this isn't like a photo op that we get to plan and make everything work in our favor. So on the operational side and on the planning side before the operation, I'm trying to make this the safest flight we can have. So if I can knock out one of those factors, which that I don't have to worry about how far out we're going to fly, and it'll still be able to do its mission. Our payloads are getting more and more advanced. Before it was a camera with who knows how many megapixels, but there wasn't 4K video back then, and we weren't trying to move something that dense. Now I could have a thermal payload that also has 4K video, and for my Homeland Security Securing the Cities initiative, it could have a giant radiation sensor on it, and that gives isotopic identification. So it doesn't do us any good if it has to fly out there, find something, and we don't know it found it, and then come back home and I have to take the card out of it and put it into a computer to see if it got a hit. So we want to have that situational awareness. We might see a bad guy fleeing when we put this thing up. We want the many eyes to be able to see that feed. We don't want the pilot has enough to do. I don't want the pilot to have to be giving out commands at the same time when they're trying to fly safely. So I think that 5G, it's going to give us that, the same way our radios have repeaters through the city so you don't lose them. And we even have them down in the subway stations. We want that 5G. There's a handshake. If it goes too far from this one, the next one takes over. And now, even if, again, I might not get that perfect beyond visual line of sight on top of a building. I might just have to park the car quick on a street corner and put up a drone. And I know my environment because your area, and I know once I get over the tree line and the poles and stuff, I should be good to fly. I want it to stay doing its mission, and I think that's the biggest. It's that situational awareness, and then the ability to get the multiple sensors that we might put on a drone to keep feeding that signal live.
And I know that you're looking at multiple sensing capabilities. So as it was mentioned by Rick Niles earlier, is that it's not just the video imagery. It could also be radiation monitoring. It can be hazmat monitoring. It can be just about anything. Yeah,
chem biosensors, whatever. That's the great thing with this technology. If they make it small enough to be carried or the drone big enough to pick it up, we want to put it in the air, right? It's just going to help our people. It's going to help the citizens, everybody.
Yeah, we had a question that somebody said, what's the return on investment for this type of thing as far as drones? And I'll go into one thing and say, you saw from the Chula Vista model that they can show you how many times the ground units are put back in service and not used. So we're working with MITRE on a separate project to actually do a white paper on that, to do some return on investment costing. But I will first say what's more important than that initially is we can usually do the implementation of drones at an incident without adding any additional personnel. We can use that with existing personnel. Most 95 to 99% of departments are using their existing people as assignments to be remote pilots. But what's really the most important thing is that reconnaissance, that information provides increased safety for our citizens and our responders. And I'll just tell you one example from the Chula Vista model. They flew into a situation where they had a person reported with a handgun. And as the drone flew closer and zoomed in, before police arrived, they could actually see that it was a cigarette lighter. Now you can imagine that changes the tension that's there, to where someone who could have been killed totally accidentally was actually determined in advance. So both the person that was involved and the police that were responding were safer because of that. And in some ways you could say that may have saved a life in and of itself. So Moshe, let me switch over to you now and say, when you're looking at the 5G, how do you see 5G really making a difference in what you're trying to accomplish with your vehicle to vehicle and your detect and avoid type of technology?
Well, when the challenges of V2V network is it has to be a full coverage. It has to be very high reliability, very high level of service, and one characteristics that is challenge to overcome for a direct radio network is communicating over where there is no line of sight, two sides of a building. Helicopter and a drone are flying in two sides of a skyscraper, and they are going to meet, but they cannot communicate because there is no direct radio. However, 5G can overcome this challenge. So in this way, the 5G bring a lot of value to the V2V network. A network speed is eventually not a challenge for the 5G, of course. The requirement is not that challenging. Now the 5G has also a direct radio option, which might be good where there is no cellular coverage, and it also might be a backup when the cellular coverage, from any reason, where the level of service of the cellular coverage is not that high for this network. So but there is still work to be done. For example, what is the range of this direct radio option, and what is the this network speed, and can a broadcast be used? But the 5G
provides much value for this V2V.
And if you don't mind, Moshe, would you also tell a little bit about some of the current experimentation you've done with the Israeli military, some of the testing you've done, and how that has progressed?
Of course, yes. Well, we tested the system on board helicopters and drones. The challenge for a detect and avoid system is to provide accurate steering commands and very low rate of false alarms, negative and positive. You don't want to tell a pilot, hey, you are about to collide with another one where there is no real risk. On the other hand, you don't want to miss a risky situation. So overall, keeping the rate of false alarm very low and providing a good steering command, this is the real challenge of every collision avoidance system, and especially when the environment is dense. If airplanes are far from each other, it is not that complicated. But when they intentionally fly close, then it leaves very little space for the collision avoidance system. So anyhow, we made, in fact, the Air Force, Israeli Air Force Flight Test Center tested our system on board helicopters and on board helicopter and a drone. They were flying really close to each other, and the feedback that we got was excellent. Anytime that there was a risk of mid-air collision, the system was shouting, I would say. The system provided alerts. When the risk was high, the system provided a steering command, clear and decisive steering command to the crewed helicopter, and it took over the autopilot of the drone and steered the drone away.
Very good. Thanks for that update. So, Mike, let me switch over to you now. From a manufacturing standpoint, I know you're looking at this 5G from the manufacturing perspective of how is this going to help performance and how are you going to use it, and what does this mean to companies like Skydio?
Yeah, I think we're excited about 5G for really two reasons. One is the ability to get higher quality video feeds to the user and to get multiple feeds in parallel to the user. So right now, when we're looking at operating over 40 LTE or over ISM bands, we're really limited to a single high quality video feed at any reasonable level of fidelity. Even though most of the drones that are employed in public safety are typically carrying an electro-optical camera for daytime color work, and probably a thermal camera as well, either for use in fire or car accidents to be able to see hotspots, or at night. That's really your only game in town. But we want the pilot not to be the only sensor operator in the loop, right? We want the command center, the TOC, supervisors to be able to consume whichever feed they feel is most helpful. And so in order to pull that off, we've got to be able to stream those feeds in parallel in full fidelity. And really that's what the bandwidth from 5G is going to bring us in this space, is the ability to send multiple video feeds in real time to multiple operators in the field, which is going to be transformative. I think the other major thing that we see 5G unlocking for us is drone as first responder. So we've been talking a lot about kind of how drones are used in public safety. The propensity of drones that we have deployed with public safety agencies are being used in a drone in the trunk model, right? They're sitting in a fire truck or in a police cruiser, and they're being pulled out at the scene, flown by a single operator on site. And that certainly has a tremendous amount of utility. But I think, Charles, to your point of the Chula Vista example, the faster that we can respond with a drone first, dispatching it from a fire station, dispatching from a police station, getting on scene ahead of the police response or the EMS response, the more situational awareness we're going to build up ahead of time. In order to do that, that's really, really hard to do across the entirety of a municipality with standard data links, right, in the ISM bands. So 5G is really what unlocks that. It allows us to get in between buildings into those challenging neighborhoods, as Detective Blando highlighted, where we can get down below the roof lines, beyond visual line of sight, wherever we need to go to be able to get the best angle that we need so that we can stream that video then to the officers as they're responding, so they can build that situational awareness before they step out of the vehicle and start to interact with the subjects. So I think that's really what we're excited about, the bandwidth that's going to provide us and the coverage that's going to provide us to unlock DFR.
So let me ask you another question. You talked about the one vehicle with many operators accessing. So now you have different people being able to maneuver or manipulate what they want to see because they need to see it right now. What's your thought about the one to many, the one operator to many into like a swarm type operation? Is that going to be something that's going to be important for what you're looking to do?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And when we kind of take a step back, and this will spill into to the next panel as well, our two large use case buckets that we think about are situational awareness and inspection. And the one-to-many model has use cases in both. I think in situational awareness, the largest use case that we're going to see is relief on station. So one of the limitations that we have with drones right now is that they don't have persistence, right? We're not talking hours of flight time unless you're talking about something that's large and gas powered, right? So if we're talking about something that's relatively small and portable and battery powered, at most you're looking at 45, maybe 50 minutes total. And a lot of scenes can persist well beyond that, as we all know. So the ability to launch a second drone when the primary drone is reaching its end of time on station, being able to go do a handoff that maintains the situational awareness of the operator is going to be tremendously powerful. And that's where I see that the main ability for having a kind of a one-to-many capability. And then, of course, the secondary piece of that is having multiple drones looking at the scene from different angles and being able to provide inherent deconfliction. And that's where Moshe's work in vehicle-to-vehicle deconfliction is going to be tremendously helpful. On the inspection side, that really boils down to being able to, if it takes me 45 minutes or an hour to go photograph a crime scene with a single drone, if I can divide that up between 2 or 4 or 8 drones, now I can do it in half or a quarter or an eighth of the amount of time, right? So we're really decreasing your amount of time on station to be able to go capture the information you need, unblock the intersection, restore traffic flow, and clear the scene.
Okay, Carl, in your situation, being in a big city, can you tell me from the challenges that you have as far as the urban canyon type settings, in addition to the really large events that occur, like your marathon, how will the drones be able to help with what you're doing, and how will 5G help to support those multiple operations?
Sure, Charles. Last marathon when we wanted to fly, you're limited in your range. So we have Kenmore Square. Right before Kenmore Square comes in, it's what's it called? It's Park Drive. But that last stretch of like a mile of the city, it's it becomes very dense, right? It goes from residential to commercial, big buildings. We have zero grids through there. So the operation of it, I actually had someone from the FAA with me, but we had to get advanced permissions. We wanted to do situational awareness of watching if all our blocking vehicles were in place and if the people were setting up their barriers on time and in the way we wanted to, following our plan. The year before, we started early and it took hours to try to drive it because you shut down all the traffic. There's nowhere to go. So you could have lights and sirens and everything, but there's just physically nowhere to go. And we only had certain places where we could cut through. So the drone helped. I did it in a fraction of the time if you're talking about time savings, but it let us then go on to the next, right? This marathon is moving. So, once it's set in motion, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. It helped us get through all the way to the finish line quicker, give all our command people in the Tactical Operations Center, able to see what they wanted to see, and they directed us while we were on the ground. But what would have been nicer to be able to do was just find a spot on a building, and I could have just flown the whole thing from one location instead of hopscotching down the road and trying to make it work. So I see 5G doing that for us. We pick a safe height because we can do it, and what do you call it? And just go from there. I did see a question pop up. I don't know where the questions go afterwards, but I saw somebody had a question about, in law enforcement, what hurdles are we coming into? And I could tell you, like a bunch of states, it started, I think, with California, New York. Now it's over with us. We have the surveillance ordinance. But what I can tell you is even before they voted on it, we changed our rules we said, you know what, there's legitimate concerns here. And our old rule didn't hit those concerns. So we changed the rule to say, even if the surveillance ordinance does not pass, we're going to put those, right in there. it's in other places in the department that you shall do these things and shall not do other things, but we wanted to put it right in the rule. There's still people out there that think we're using the drones to spy instead of what we've been pushing, Charles, the drones for good. So we want to, show them that, hey, there's accountability here. Here's the missions we're going to fly. Here's what we're absolutely not going to do with the drone. And I think that helps build support. But it's an ongoing thing. And, at some point we have to talk to City Hall and our city councilors so that we can have this open dialogue on what, the drones are. We want to demystify it for people and say, here's what we're doing with them. We go to building collapses. I've searched for, runaway kids with it at night. It's like, we're just doing drones for good. We're not spying on people. And if we ever get to the point of spying on people, honestly, it's gone through a judge and they've gotten a search warrant to do whatever they're going to do. And a lot of times the drone is not necessarily the right technology to do that. So I think we're going to just stick with our drones for good, doing our situational awareness stuff. And, eventually in this complex Class B airspace, go towards a drone as a first responder. Because Mike is correct. It's great running around with a drone in your car, but you really need one on standby. And the quicker it can get out there, the faster it does stuff. Chula Vista said, one of the things of their concern was in law enforcement, everything you get is from a 911 call from someone that you have no idea who they are. And we're taking, them at their word that they're reporting things correctly. The drone gets there and, I'll beat this drum, whether it sees the bad guy or not, it sees the police response. And everybody wants to see the police response. And we want you to see the police response because we're doing the right thing. So it's a big game changer. I'll let somebody else answer, but that's the crux of it. We just want to be able to fly the safest way and the most efficient way. And I think we will do that.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I think that one of the things we as drone responders are promoting heavily is we work with Skydio to develop the 5 C's about the responsible flight to maintain public trust. And really a part of that whole thing is making sure that we are transparent, that we are doing things that are based on response mechanisms versus random surveillance. Random surveillance is just totally not recommended in any of our procedures or policies. And Chula Vista has done such a great job of their dashboard, is that everything is out there on board to show where the flights went, what they did, how many they are, the difference it made. And a lot of people, what they're doing now is, as you know, the ACLU has a very big concern, not on the drone, but on the data. And their biggest concern is that we don't want to create this stockpile of data on your community that you can then use collectively against them. So what most departments are doing is using the same policy as body cameras, that in 30 days it's purged and it's erased unless there's an investigation or something that follows where it's needed to be used in that particular case. And that's the kind of recommendations that we do in general. I will also say that what's really important about any of the drone programs is that you're meeting with your community and that you're having conversations with town hall meetings and that you're transparent with your operations. They can put their hands on the drone. They can understand and ask questions what you're going to be doing and how you're going to be doing. And if we have questions during, your operations, where can we go to get information, and to make that all available. I know that you mentioned this, Carl, and it was kind of funny because I think it was Lewis in Elizabeth, New Jersey, that was saying their drone flew as a drone as a first responder, got over the scene because a woman had reported a guy was in the yard that was threatening them in some way. And she saw the drone fly over and she called 911 and said, "Hey, there's a drone flying over. What's that about?" And they said, "That's us." And she said, "That's fantastic." She said, knowing that you guys are getting eyes on and helping me, they were able to get information in advance. So that's the kind of thing that we're seeing is that new eyes in the sky done correctly. Again, we're all pushing really hard to maintain transparency, and then we're not doing that. So let me switch over to Moshe. So Moshe, what has to happen next for you to know how reliable the system is going to be? What do you need to see?
Well, we need to see that in order to provide a safe environment or safe to be able to separate, to deconflict safely, we need a transmission range of around 2.5 miles between vehicles. So of course, a cellular network can overcome this, but the question is, what happens in case of the cellular service is not available, either because this area is not covered yet by the cellular, it might be a remote area, or because the cellular priorities are somewhere else, especially mainly in case of disaster relief, where the network is heavily loaded. We must, a collision avoidance system that is based on V2V must enjoy the highest priority. You cannot allow to create a system that when the demand is very high and the load is very high, then suddenly the network will not work, and then the vehicles will collide with each other. So the questions are whether or not this V2V network can enjoy a high level of service even in case of an emergency or case of very high load. Another question is, can the V2V network or can the 5G technology can provide enough transmission range between vehicles where there is no network, there is no cellular coverage. Also, where there is no cellular coverage, we need to have the broadcast capability, meaning that every transmission received by all. The nature of cellular network is that each one communicates to another one, but the nature of a V2V network is that each transmission might be received by all its neighbors. I would say these are the main challenges that needs to be investigated or need to be looked at.
Okay, so one of the questions that came up was about drones as first responder. What's the biggest hurdles? Is it technology or is it regulatory? I'd say it's probably 50-50. We're getting through some of the regulatory stuff now with using visual observers, but using the visual observers is what we have to do that's more the costly piece of it because we don't have the technology. So once we have the detect and avoid technology, that will impact the regulatory side of what we're able to accomplish. So it's both of those things.
I totally agree. And the observers, they cannot secure high enough safety where the traffic would be really dense, where there will be a lot of vehicles in the sky. Observers cannot do the job. Only technology can do the job. And we are not that far away from this day. So I can't make it. I'm trying my best to explain or to preach for this V2V network. The V2V network is absolutely necessary to enable a vast use of this great technology.
So I want to switch over to Mike, and so when you're looking at the technologies and detect and avoid and those kind of things, how do you see that playing in your manufacturing model?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing that we're focused on right now with respect to 5G is working with carriers to get into the nuances of how we're going to deploy that technology. I mean, it's one thing for us to throw a dev kit on a large drone and go fly it as a one-off, and a lot of us are doing that in this room, right? I think it's another to build a sustainable, scalable product in partnership with a carrier, especially within North America. So I think from that perspective, there are two things that we're looking to really unlock drones first responder and help things scale. One is the ability to have quality of service guarantees. So if we're going to go out and we're going to stream high fidelity video, each frame in that video matters, right? We've seen numerous instances from Chula Vista and other programs where a suspect is fleeing and they discard a weapon. That one frame of that person doing this is critical. And if we drop that frame because we have a hiccup in our quality of service, we've now lost that information and extended the investigation or the follow-up that's going to have to happen for that event. So getting to a place where we can have discussions with carriers for critical events to make sure that we've got extremely high quality of service and that we're protecting that bandwidth with the network is extremely important. AT&T has done a good job of this with FirstNet. I'd like to see something along those lines be available within the 5G sphere as well. And then I think the second one is, again, most 5G networks right now are designed for terrestrial devices, right? They're optimized for us walking around with our phones. When you have a device that's operating nets, 200 feet or potentially higher based on your concept of operations with the FAA. That's a different device, a different radio, different antenna parameters. It's kind of a different network paradigm. And so again, working with the carriers to make sure that we've got the volume of coverage that we need to be able to operate responsibly in the COAs that we're looking at is going to be a challenge as well. So I think it's really those two, making sure that we can operate where we need to, and making sure that when we're operating there, that we've got the level of service that we need.
And are you working toward any type of airworthiness certificates?
Yeah, so this becomes a tricky subject, and I know we're getting close on time here. The short answer is potentially. We're keeping the option open down the road. Matternet's type cert recently has been incredibly compelling for us. That's a long road to be able to haul. I think in general, figuring out how we're going to operate sustainably over people with high levels of reliability is the bigger question. There are a number of different avenues there, of which type cert is one, but that is very much an open question for us right now.
Okay, and Carl, I'm gonna wrap up with you last. Talk a little bit about the need for the prioritization in your operation with 5G.
Yeah, I mean, our fear is if you go to a 4G or 5G network, when like the worst things happen on the planet, those networks get overloaded, and what we've been relying on could just go, just die off with it. So if that's what you mean by the prioritization, we want to be able to, when we send something up, that it's getting that first priority, just like our cell phones, right? We have that, we're on the Verizon network, and I know that if my personal cell doesn't work, my work phone should, because it's going to supposedly grab first. For our feeds, that's what you're hoping for. Somebody had a question in there, and I think it deleted because they asked something about that effect. Are we going to take, Charles? Are we going to take questions next, or is it?
No, I think we've been taking the questions as we've gone through. So I think we're gonna wrap up. So with that, I want to thank all of you for being here. Carl, it's always great to work with you, and thanks for the info from Boston PD, and Moshe, thanks for being here from over in Israel and the work that you're doing. We're looking forward to see how that plays out into the public safety arena. And of course, Mike, thanks to you and Skydio for all the great work that you all have been doing, and we're looking forward to more partnerships in the future. So with that, this is a wrap.